Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. And our continuing series of 10 questions. Do fascism today, fascism in the 1920s and 1930s. Some people just want to see the world burn. So for a long time, fascism wasn't an issue. And suddenly, within the last 5 to 8 years, it's become a thing. And there's a lot of fighting over what exactly is fascism. What kind of ideology is fascism? That's our first question. What kind of ideology is fascism? And the answer is conservative. It's revanchist. It is the far right of the far right. It wants to return the nation and the society to a purer, better time. It wants to make Italy Rome again. It wants to make Germany 1871 again. It wants to make Spain Catholic again. There's always a desire to return. That's not liberal. So if you hear somebody on social media, on Twitter, on YouTube, call the Nazis liberal, that tells you how far right they are, that they are beyond. They are Wile E. Coyote throwing a hole into a mountain and walking through it, kind of to the far right. Because the Nazis and the Fasci in Italy, Mussolini's party, and Franco and the fascists in Spain were all conservatives. All of them. And we'll talk about how as we move on. But there's no debate about it. Their allies were conservative parties and conservative institutions and conservative corporations, and their enemies, as we'll see, were the libs, were communists, were people who wanted to change the society. So what kind of ideology is fascism? It is a conservative, revanchist ideology. If you don't like that, that doesn't mean you could change it and make them liberal just because you're conservative and you hate the libs and like, fascists are now liberal. No, they're not. They're just not. They're just not. So what does fascism believe? And it believes that all men are not equal. Right there. All men are not equal. Men of a superior ethnic group are great. Women of that ethnic group are good for making more men of that ethnic group. Everyone else should die and get out of the way or work for the superior race. They should make space for their superiors. Get out of the way. Move. Get out of the way. So what do they value? Traditions. Rural folk. Values of rural peoples. Those are superior. It is the ideology of the Hallmark Christmas movie. Now, I'm not going to say Hallmark Christmas movies are fascist, but it's that culture. Hallmark Christmas movies do not like the liberal urban city. They value the traditions and values of the rural, exurban, or conservative, more religious countryside. Male-led marriage, that the men are the breadwinner, that is natural, that men are in charge of women and children. The home is my castle, right? Again, I'm not going to say Mr. Banks is a fascist, but he's a conservative. The Hallmark movie, Christmas movies are conservative. I'm not saying they're fascist, but they're conservative. And there's no doubt about that. Both Mr. Banks will tell you he's conservative at the beginning of the movie, and that's a good thing, right? He doesn't want change. He doesn't like Mary Poppins coming in and messing stuff up. He literally tells Mary Poppins that he doesn't approve of her new methods, except for fox hunting. He's like, well, that's tradition. He literally says, Mary Poppins, you're too liberal with my kids. Well, you took them on fox hunting, and that's okay, because that's tradition. It's the same thing with the Hallmark Christmas movies. They're conservative. Now, you can be a conservative and not be a fascist. That's part of the point here. The fascists are conservatives plus, conservatives more. Because conservatives, as we've talked about, are okay with things changing, but slowly. They like the way things are. Fascists want to return. They want to go back. They want revenge. So they believe in the traditions of rural folk and traditional rural values. Those are superior. Male-led marriage is natural. That war makes boys into men, and that's a good thing. That's traditional. Of course we do war. How else do you make a boy into a man? Otherwise, you end up with Oscar Wilde. Talented, but also kind of gay. Well, not kind of gay, very gay. Wearing his cape and being flamboyant. And that's the problem we had in 1915, right? That the conservatives saw that without a war, all these boys were kind of decadent and kind of gay. They weren't real men. And great men need the willpower to change the system and break the rules. That the rules are there to hinder, to hold back, to keep great men from being great. They're put in there by women and minorities and losers and not great men. Those rules are put in to keep you from being awesome. Sammy Hagar was not allowed to drive, had to drive 55. He could not drive 55. Why? Because Sammy Hagar is awesome. He's in a Ferrari, and a Ferrari's not meant to go 55. And if you don't know any of these references, just look up Sammy Hagar. I can't drive 55. Dun 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 dun. Those rules are holding you back. And so violence and control are part of restoring the proper system. You have to break eggs to make a better Germany. You have to return liberal women to their proper place as a wife and mother. You have to show minorities proper subservience. You have to, and they're going to resist. You know they're going to resist because they have quote-unquote rights. Well, great men don't care about rights. Great men care about the future, which is supposed to be like the past. And so if we have to break some heads, arrest some people, take them out of society, well, we're just going to have to do that. That will recreate the better society of the past. So violence and control are part of restoring the proper system. So fascism believes in violence, lots of violence. What does fascism hate? Well, the number one thing fascism hates is communism. More than anything else, it's communism. And I know you may go, well, the Nazis, and I will agree with you, they saw communism and Judaism as the same thing. Communism was dangerously stupid. It wanted to overthrow the entire system. All people are created equal. F that. Communism. Democracy. Democracy is the corrupt chaos of idiots. These aren't great men running a democracy. It's a bunch of idiots raising their hand about things they know nothing about. Winston Churchill has a quote about this. The best argument against democracy is 5 minutes with the average voter. George Carlin has a comedy sketch about this. Imagine, understand, realize how dumb the average person is, and realize half of people are dumber than that. Why would you put these people in charge? Right? There's the woman who, yelling about Obamacare, yelled at her representative, her state representative, her congressman, saying, get government out of my Medicare. Well, Medicare is all government. You know, how are these people? These people are voting. And fascism says, well, they're idiots. They shouldn't get to vote. Now, that's an argument that goes all the way back to Plato. Like, this is not new. Again, it's conservative, right? Hating communism. It's conservative. Peace. Tybalt from Romeo and Juliet. Peace. Benvolio, at the start of the play, there's a fight, and Benvolio says, Tybalt, call your men to peace. Let's have peace. Let's not have a fight. And Tybalt looks at Benvolio, because they're equals, right? They're both cousins of the main family. Looks at Benvolio and goes, peace? I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues, and thee. Benvolio, look upon thy death. And he takes out his weapon. Right? Peace. It makes men in society weak. It's the boomers who complained about kids that they're not playing dodgeball anymore. Why? Because dodgeball showed you war in the trenches. It was brutal, it was unfair, and it was to make boys into men. Peace? Oh, let's do jumping jacks and calisthenics? Oh, that's nice. That's cute. Sports should be like war. Isn't that what Vince Lombardi said? And he's got a football trophy named after him. So again, something that is not, that you see in other cultures, in other places, that we have dealt with in other times. That peace makes men in society weak. And finally, and these aren't really in any order, but finally, there's a diversity and difference and miscegenation, the mixing of religious and sexual and genders and racial groups drains the greatness by adding all of these impurities. That if you take 100% awesome man, and it's always going to be a man, and mixes that 100% awesome man with someone who's 0% awesome, a foreigner of a different religion, well, what are your kids going to be? They're going to be a mix of that. They're going to be 50% awesome, maybe. And then what if their kids do that? Then it's 25% awesome. And what if they do that? Then it's 10 or 12% awesome. And you just drained out your awesomeness by mixing, by diversity. Diversity doesn't make you great. Diversity makes you impure. Differences don't make you great. They make you brittle. That you're not unified. So you have to get rid of all of these things. Religious and sexual and gender and racial differences. So it hates all of these things. Communism, democracy, peace, and diversity, difference, and miscegenation. Now remember, the United States had anti-miscegenation laws well into the 1960s. And even different groups of white people disliked people marrying into different other white people, the Irish and the Italians and the Puerto Ricans. Those were not easy marriages that were happening in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. Lots of parents objected. Lots of grandparents objected even more. You'll hear the old timers talk about how you had to marry somebody from, even though you're in New York, it wasn't good enough to marry someone who was Italian. You had to marry someone who was from the same village, even though you were 5,000 miles away, or at least the same region. Like, what would a Southerner know about marrying a Northern Italian? Only how it'll ruin them, really. They have nothing in common. The Irish and the Italian, oh, they have nothing in common. The Pope actually had to put out a decree at some point saying Italian and Irish marriages are not miscegenation. That they're both Catholic, it's okay. That's how confrontational it was in the United States. The Pope had to get involved. And you go, well, these are two white people. And you can say that, but they weren't considering each other to be the same. So let's explain fascist philosophy. And when we do this, we can go into the 20s and the 30s and the such, but really what we want to talk about is Nietzsche. Because Nietzsche is the one guy of all the people we could talk about who you may have heard of, who is an important philosopher. And he's writing in the 1880s, 1890s. And his big issue, this big philosophy that's going to come out, I mean, there's going to be Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, really. But, it's Nietzsche's problem to be linked to the Nazis. So we have to talk about Nietzsche. And his big philosophy was the will to power. This idea that one had to struggle to overcome the oppression of your surroundings. Now, that's kind of Rousseau, right? That's a revolutionary idea. Okay? Now, where Rousseau will talk about the society doing this, and that will get us communism. That will get us, Marx looks at Rousseau and goes, the workers have to do this together. Nietzsche looks at it and says, most people suck. Most people will never be able to do that. So we need the Übermensch, literally kind of the supermen, the men above other men. In modern parlance, it's the Giga Chad. They're rare, and they're too awesome to be bound by the rules of normies. They're just too awesome. They're the Giga Chad. And what they need to do is break the rules, break those chains surrounding everybody, free the oppressed superior race, and teach men how to be men again. That's Neo in The Matrix. That's Scar in The Lion King. That's Dash in The Incredibles. And that's Ayn Rand's objectivism. So Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. All you need is willpower. You don't need money. You don't need talent. You don't need God. You don't need democratic permission to do what you want to do. To break society, to, quote, free it. That's the Giga Chad. That's Dash, where he's complaining to his mom after he's been acting out by using his special powers. And his mom says, Dash, who thinks of himself as a Chad, is like, but I'm special. And the mom says, everyone's special, Dash. And then he says, that's another way of saying no one is. Right? That if everyone's special, then no one is. And you know who's special? He's special. And he's blonde, blue-eyed, and he can run faster than everybody else. And it's the normies who won't let him be special, that are holding him back in that school class full of other normies who will never, ever be as awesome as Dash is. That's Neo in The Matrix. Right? He's literally has no money. He doesn't really have any talent. There's no God in that movie. But Morpheus tells him, you're the one, Neo, who will break the system, who will break the chains, who will see the Matrix, who will defeat the Matrix and set everybody free. Like, that's Neo in the Matrix is Nietzsche's Übermensch. The Avengers, Superman, is an Übermensch. Now, interestingly, with Superman, and we've talked about Superman in Democracy, is Superman is willing, despite he's unlike Dash and unlike Neo, he's willing to be bound by the rules. If Batman kind of doesn't be bound by the rules, Superman does. Truth, justice, and the American way. And the American way is democratic. The American way is all people are created equal, right? So Superman, despite his superpowers, limits himself. And there's a great quote from Batman to the other members of the Justice League that Superman is like a god. He has all the powers of a god, but he doesn't think of himself as a god. And it's good for us that he doesn't. So what does Superman think of himself as? An American citizen. That's it. Leni Riefenstahl's movie of the Nazis taking power. One of the great movies of all time. One of the most terrifying. It's a horror movie if you're a historian because you know what's coming. But it's one of the great movies of all time. It's going to inspire two generations of directors to make movies. It's Scar and the Lion King. They take shot by shot. They just recreate shots from Triumph of the Will. It is one of the great movies of all time, and it is a horror movie for those who know what's happening. But Triumph of the Will. It's not we won, we got more votes. It's not we're better. It's not the triumph of the right. It's not return. It's the triumph of the will. Everybody said we couldn't, and we did because we wanted it more. What's the advantages of fascism? Why do people like it? Why do people like it today? Even if they try to say, oh, I'm not a fascist, or fascism is liberal, they're still advocating fascist ideology. Why? Because it ties people back to a nostalgic past instead of the crappy present or promising an unknown future. Fascism didn't work in Germany in the 1920s. It worked after the Great Depression, 1930s. Fascism has made a comeback, not in the 1980s or the 1990s in the United States. It's made a comeback in the 2010s after the fall of the banks, after the economic collapse within deindustrialization. And the boomers hit 70. The boomers started to retire. And that's a crappy present. As you get older, things fall apart. And you look back at when you were 20 and the way things were when you were 20. And so there's this tie to this nostalgic past of when men were men, women were women, and minorities knew their place. And everything was great. We see this. We see this in polling. Who thinks the past was better? And the polling is always the same. People over 65, the past was better. Who thinks the future will be better? People under 30. So is it a surprise that older people are conservative and younger people are liberal? Older people want to keep things the way they are, and younger people want to change things because they want the future to be better for them. So it ties people to the nostalgic past when things were better, instead of the crappy present they're living in. And if you're living in the Great Depression, it's the worst present. And the future is unknown. Everyone's promising you things about the future, and you have no idea what's going to happen. So it's just safer, it's nicer to kind of wrap that blanket of nostalgia around you and go, the 50s were better, the 60s were better. I was just in CVS picking up some things. And the magazines, there was not one magazine that appealed to anybody under 50. It was George Harrison's 80th birthday is coming up. It's the Beatles in photos. It's Remember the 60s. People magazines, the Presley family, the Presley women, the women of Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley has been dead 30 years. 40 years? 40 years. Right? All of these magazines, not one of them appealed to anybody under 30. So what are they selling? They're selling nostalgia. They're selling your past was better. Music was better. Celebrities were better. 2 is the end of individuality. The second advantage is this end of individuality. It's thrilling to be part of a group working together. You matter because you're part of the group. You're shouting out the slogans. If you've ever been to a Taylor Swift concert, you know this. That's why they keep the lights low on the crowds. Because in the dark, you can do whatever. You could scream, you can yell, you can dance, you could sing along. It is thrilling to be part of a group that does something. Anyone who's ever been on a sports team knows this. And fascism promises that we will all work together. Now, communism does too. Communism also ends individuality for the collective whole. You know? So it's democratic liberalism that has the emphasis on individuality. So, just so you know, there are similarities. 3, revenge and violence against those you don't like. The communists, the feminists, the Jews, the religious and racial minorities, those lib profs, those gays and trans. You get revenge on them. You've been tired of hearing them and tired of them demanding rights and tired of having to see them. You're tired of them. And what fascism says is we will end that. We'll get rid of immigration. We'll get rid of those brown people. We'll get rid of the Jews. And we'll teach women to be the right kind of women. And we're going to just murder the communists. Don't you worry about that. We'll make sure communism never happens. And those lib profs, we'll prosecute them. We'll fire them. And we'll send them to jail. And gay and trans people, they won't even exist. We won't even have to deal with their quote-unquote rights. Because let's face it, they're not real. They're only real because liberal laws allow them to say, oh, I'm gay. Yeah, whatever. Right? You get revenge. You don't have to have genderless bathrooms. We could just have regular old bathrooms. And so you get revenge against those people you don't like. That's an advantage of fascism. Why should they have that money? Why should they be so privileged? Why should they get taken care of? And the second thing is, it does offer security by the state, health and jobs and social welfare. And this is where the conservatives come in today and say, oh, the Nazis were National Socialists. They're socialists, and socialists are left. Well, they weren't socialists. Because who they were using the state for was Aryan Germans. And who they used the state against was all the people they didn't like. Jews and communists, lib femmes, gays, trans, disabled people, liberal profs, the church. So it's using the state to help the superior race while using the power of the state to hurt the minorities and the people you don't like. 4, it can turn you, a conservative man, from a poorly paid loser doing hard work for little money with little to no security into a hero, into someone respected with dignity. The Romans would have called this dignitas. And I see a lot of parallels between the end of the Roman Republic and the late 2010s, early 2020s in how societies are acting, how a liberal democratic society acts. But what fascism says is exactly the line from Fight Club. You are consumers. You have no great crusade. You have no great depression to fight against. Your great depression is your life. And we, the Fight Club, will turn you into real men. Notice, no women joined Fight Club. Now, I've watched MMA. There are women in that. I've watched wrestling for a very long time. There are women in that. There are no women in Fight Club. Just one woman in that entire movie. And so what fascism promises is to turn you, the conservative man who doesn't feel respected, who doesn't feel like they have dignity, who is a poorly paid, hard-working, but for not enough money, and society calls you a loser because you don't have that college education, because you don't have that finance job, because you don't have that big house in the suburbs and the vacation home in the Hamptons. Well, it can turn you into a hero. Look what The Lion King does. What The Lion King does in one song turns Scar is able to turn the hyenas, who are a bunch of lazy idiots in the beginning, right? And we know they're a bunch of lazy idiots because of who their voice actors are. It's Whoopi Goldberg and Cheech Marin, and I don't know who the third one is, but he's barely audible. Right? His eyes don't even point in the same direction, right? You don't get, well, I mean, Whoopi can do drama, but she's famous for her comedy. Cheech Marin, famous for his comedy. You get those voices to do comedy. So the hyenas are comedic. They're silly. They're not serious. But in one song, those hyenas are turned from these lazy, selfish idiots into goose-stepping, perfectly aligned soldiers who are bowing down to Scar. Look at the scene, and it is right out of Triumph of the Will. Look at the scene. Their heads perfectly turned in the same direction. Their feet perfectly aligned, right? An entire box of them marching, right? Even the land, which was all cliffs and crags and caves, has been totally leveled for this evil green mist, right? But it's totally flattened and squared off. Geometry has been imposed. A flatness has been imposed on nature. And what did Scar do it with? Nothing but his will and his personality. One song. It takes 3 minutes of Be Prepared for the hyenas to be turned into an army. So what's the disadvantage of fascism? So if fascism is so great, why isn't everyone a fascist? Why isn't every conservative a fascist? And the answer is because there's a lot of disadvantages to it. First, it hates you. It hates everybody. Fascism hates everybody. Modern men are too weak to be Giga Chads. So you need to be fixed. We see this a lot today with the Joe Rogan podcast, or especially with the Jordan Peterson podcast slash YouTube channel, where they call you an idiot. You're not lifting enough. You're not tough enough. You're being told what to do by women. You're definitely not smart enough, because Joe Rogan will tell you what you need to know, and Jordan Peterson will tell you how to live your life, how to make your bed, what clothes to wear. Fascism hates you. And if you're not this superior racial group, it really hates you. So if you're a minority in any way, whether it's gender or racial or religious, it really hates you. Women and minorities and immigrants are barely useful at best in this system, and they're enemies at worst. They're making the society worse. So you hear the people who say, it's never a liberal who says this, it's always conservatives who say, you don't need a college education. Black people should go back to Africa. We should kick out all the immigrants. Okay, but why? How? What? First, I go to the how. Like, how are you going to possibly do this? But, like, who's an immigrant? All of my ancestors are immigrants. The only people who aren't immigrants are the Native Americans who are on the reservations. So if you're going to say go back where you came from, why does it not include all the different kinds of white people? But that's the idea. It hates everybody, fascism. Now, conservatism, this is one of those differences between conservatism and fascism. Conservatives don't want to change, but they look at the society and say, it's fine. It's pretty good. We like the way things are. So, again, not all conservatives are fascists, but all fascists are conservative. Just like not all liberals are communists, but all communists are liberals, right? It is a philosophy of the left, just like fascism is a philosophy of the conservative right. 2, it has to win. Fascism cannot exist with anybody else. There is no coexisting. It is war all the time, forever, versus everyone. It has to win. Why? Because of number 1, it hates everybody. It can't coexist with people it hates. 3, there's no cultural progress. There's no promise of cultural progress because it wants to return to an idealized past. It wants to go backwards. It wants to make, and there was Albert Speer actually, and this is why I have it in the video, actually made models of a Berlin when the Nazis won. When the Nazis had won and taken over all of Europe, they were going to remodel Berlin and take it from this German, like, capital city and turn it into Rome. Like, Rome. Like, that's kind of crazy. Now, the U.S. kind of did that. We built a totally new city, Washington, D.C. And what did we use? A lot of Roman neoclassical architecture. The idea being was the Romans were great. We're going to prove we're great by recreating the Romans. Right? Okay, but New York doesn't do that. Philly doesn't do that, even though we have a Parthenon in Philly. At I think it's the Four Seasons restaurant. It used to be a bank. It was a Parthenon. And what the Nazis were talking about doing was going back and leveling Berlin and turning it into a Rome. It's even crazier because Rome is not German. Rome is Italian. So it means not only no cultural progress, but a return And here's the other thing. Berlin or Germany was never part of the Roman Empire. So you're returning to this idealized past that your own culture never had. So there's no cultural progress. There's no modern art. It has to be the past all the time. Number 4, women and minorities, liberal education and the modern arts have no future. They have no future. The liberal education must be subservient to fascist needs. Modern art, well, we just talked about no cultural progress. There is no modern art. You could only recreate the past. Women have to go back to being mothers and wives, and minorities either have to work for the superior group and have no rights, or disappear. One way or the other. They have no future in this system. And finally, 5, laws are meaningless, which kind of sounds weird because the fascists are all about control. But remember, it's the will to power that matters. So you can make whatever laws you want. Hitler, Mussolini, Franco didn't obey them. They just did what they wanted. So the laws are meaningless because if the leaders don't follow the laws, then their followers don't follow the laws. And so the laws are made up and they're used to punish people who have to be controlled by the law. Women, minorities, liberals, communists. That there is a group that the law protects, but they don't follow. And there's a group that has to follow the law, but the law doesn't protect. So the laws are meaningless. There is no predictability. It's the will to power that matters. What's the irony of fascism? Well, you can kind of see it in our poster, our graphic arts posters, or this little GIF from Victor Victoria, which is the most ironic thing of all. And if you know Victor Victoria, you know where this is going. The irony of fascism is it's obsessed with the male body. Whether the teen, well, they're all teens in the two pictures, in the two posters, right? They're obsessed with the male body, but they hate homosexuality. It hates homosexuality. It's unmanly to be gay. And yet it's obsessed with the male body. The Nazi uniforms, the SS uniforms were made by Hugo Boss. Slim cut, tailored look, not worker drab. Take any pictures you want and compare the Nazi SS uniforms to the Russian uniforms, the communist uniforms, and you'll see this massive difference. The art that the Nazis promoted was Greek and Roman sculptures. Greek and Roman sculptures have lots of gay subtexts. And movies, we talk about Triumph of the Will, right? But they also made 5 musicals, including Victor Victoria, which is all about a trans themes. It's a woman becoming a man, acting like a man. And so this is our GIF, where she's looking at this man and she's learning how to act like a man. She noticed she's smoking and she sees how he does what he does with his hands. And so she learns how to be a man by watching this other man. It's all trans. If you could have picked one movie that, like, the Nazis totally couldn't have made, it's Victor Victoria. So you there's no one who says, no, that's Triumph of the Will is a fascist movie. Victor Victoria is like, it's the irony of fascism, right? But notice It's not a woman, it's not a man becoming a woman. It is a woman becoming a man. And the hilarity that ensues. But 5 musicals, the gayest of the arts. 5 musicals. So the irony of fascism is it's kind of gay. It's obsessed with the male body. It's obsessed with a physically fit male body, a thin body, a strong body. And it's obsessed with men and boys being together. That's the second poster we have, right? The shirtless boys, shirtless teens, young men, one with his hand around the shoulder and neck of the other one. You know, like, all in our kind of Boy Scout Hitler Youth, right? It's all boys admiring the other boy who's doing the salute and holding the Nazi flag, who's the leader of the group. You know? It's kind of gay. For something that is so anti-homosexual. So that leads us to, is fascism silly? And it's kind of a mixed question. Because the war, the death, the mass murder, the subservience is very, very fucking serious. It just is. Fascism hates you and wants to eliminate you. But comedians, from the very beginning, saw fascism as ridiculously self-obsessed. We get Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, where we have an effete Hitler. I mean, look at this. Look at our GIF coming down. He's playing with the globe, right? It's a balloon. He goes, bing, and the balloon hits him in the butt. He goes, bing, and shoots it back up. That's not serious. Mel Brooks in the movie The Producers has a flamboyantly gay Hitler. Springtime for Hitler, for Hitler and Germany, right? And they have a whole dance routine for the Nazis. And Mel Brooks himself tells you to be a smarty to support the Nazi party. That comedians from the very beginning poked fun at fascism. And we see this in 2017 with Charlottesville. So a bunch of American white supremacist guys with tiki torches and polo shirts go marching in Charlottesville to, quote, protect a statue of Robert E. Lee. And they shout together slogans like, Jews will not replace us, right? Okay, very fascist, right? And what do we get? We get a husband-wife comedy duo singing a song, creating a song called Tiki Torch Nazis. Sandy and Richard Riccardi. And they do it to Beauty School Dropout from Greece. This is hardly gore here that they're using. They're not using heavy metal. They're using Beauty School Dropout from Greece to sing a song called Tiki Torch Nazis. And Mel Brooks will tell you that the Nazis, the best way of defeating the Nazis is to laugh at them. Is to show how unserious fascism is, because fascism is so obsessed with its seriousness. Bing! And so you have to laugh at them and show people that they're not serious, that they're not good, that if you can laugh at them. So from the very beginning, fascism, which sees itself as extremely serious, and its ramifications are extremely serious. Don't get me wrong. We're going to talk about World War II. Everything in World War II is unbelievably serious and traumatic and awful. They also, comedians from the very beginning, were poking fun at it. As a ridiculous philosophical notion. Okay, so why choose fascism? Those are the advantages, those are the disadvantages. It's a bit silly. What problems does it solve? Well, it solves all those annoying liberal problems you hear about every day: equality and feminism and immigrants and help to the disadvantaged and boo, boo, boo. Oh, I want more rights. F off. It tells you to F off. It's my country. It's my society. It's my economy. It's my money. It's my house. It's mine. F off. I don't have to share it. And government is going to help me to stay awesome, not help you become me or help you get a ladder. No. Fascism makes me important, keeps me important. And it's going to do that with jobs and respect and dignity and purpose and excitement. It's going to be exciting to be a member of the Nazi Party. It's going to be exciting to march at Nuremberg with the torches. And there's a promise of a great and totally understandable future where nothing is going to change except my awesomeness. Especially my awesomeness and everyone else's subservience. I'm not going to have to deal with all you liberals demanding rights and privileges and equity and shut up. F off. It's mine, not yours. And that's why you choose fascism. You don't choose fascism if you're the immigrant. You don't choose fascism if you're the minority. You choose fascism if you're the majority, the empowered, but somehow you feel like the changes in society are against you. That you're feeling disempowered. And so there's a song from Cabaret, which is written by a gay man with his husband, called Tomorrow Belongs to Me. Now, Cabaret is one that is set in Weimar, Germany, not Nazi Germany, but it's about the rise of the Nazis. And it shows kind of the liberalism, how liberal Weimar Germany is. There's trans themes, there's cross-dressing, there's a lot. There's Liza Minnelli in a top hat. There is a lot going on in it. And there's a song at a beer garden in a rural outside Berlin, outside the main cities. And if we do it in class, we'll show the video. But what it does is it turns the ordinary, a Boy Scout, into something dangerous. A beer garden becomes a Nazi rally. It turns the ordinary and the good, a day out in the countryside, into something dangerous. It promises a future that looks like the rural past. It's not an industrial future. It's not chemistry. It's not finance. It's not industry and smokestacks in the city. It's the rural countryside. It's the past. And number 3, one person plus nationalism can move and invigorate an entire crowd. That we start with a song by one young man who sings about the son of the meadow is summery warm. The stag in the forest runs free. But gather together to greet the storm. Tomorrow belongs to me. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. The sun on the meadow is summery warm. That's beautiful. The stag, the deer, in the forest runs free. Great. That's nature. But gather together to greet the storm. Yes, we should. We should work together. Right? We're Jersey Strong from Superstorm Sandy, right? Jersey Strong. It wasn't I'm strong. It's we're together. We're working together. And as a young person, tomorrow belongs to me. It does. Right? I'm young. We're young. Tomorrow is for us. Yes. It's a traditional promise of youth. But by the end We have women who are singing along. We have other men in Nazi uniforms singing along. We have the entire crowd of people singing except for the old man. The old man who has seen this before, who has lived through the First World War, who's lived through the traumas of the late empire, who may, as a young man, have served in 1871. Or his father served in 1871, the glorious war against the French, right? And has seen all this, he has seen, he knows the train is coming. He has seen it before. But the young people have this promise. Fatherland, fatherland, show us a sign your children have waited to see. The morning will come when the world is mine. Tomorrow belongs to me. So what does popular culture and fascism look like? Well, it starts with a rejection of all modern art. It's an emphasis on traditional art, traditional values, and traditional methodologies. Here we have nice German art, a bunch of women in the rural countryside going off to go work in the fields. We got one with an accordion. Notice, no jazz trumpets, right? It's an accordion, a rural, traditional rural instrument. And the women are in peasant dresses, their heads covered and humble, right? They're not showing off their sexy hair, right? They're in a meadow, summery warm. The second thing, and this is at the bottom of our screen, is it celebrates real men struggling against the enemies, the losers, especially the Jews, and feminization. These are not men who are going to be brought down. Look at our things. We got the Nazi swastika carved into a block of iron, a block of granite, right? Though it looks to me like steel, like polished steel. And here is our Aryan standing 10 feet tall, and all these other people who take on the red cap of communism. They got the eyeglasses of the intellectuals, right? They're Jews. And look, and he is standing there with clenched fists. He's not kicking their ass yet, but he is standing there with his shirt open, his chest hair poking out, his nice lean waist tied in a belt to his jeans, to his pants. Oh, and he's looking down at them. He's not taking their crap. Triumph of the will, right? Our German student, right? With his tie and his sleeves rolled up, and he's got the Nazi flag, He's got a thin waist with a tight belt, with a belt buckle. He's in black and brown. His hair is coiffed, definitely uses product. He's got good teeth. And he's staring off into the future, into the sun, right? They're not going to be limited by these enemies, the communists. They're not going to be corrupted by all of these other losers or Jews. And they're definitely not going to become feminized men, listening to their wives and being told what to do by their mothers. Third, popular culture is going to be government supported and bought. This is how fascist economics works. The government spends a lot of money to create the kind of stuff it wants. That could be tanks. That can be art. It doesn't own the artists like communism does. It doesn't own the artists. It doesn't own the production, the means of production. It is still private. You could still make kind of the art you want, but there's limitations on that. So you end up with lots of graphic arts and graphic design. Sometimes you even get great art, Triumph of the Will and Victor and Victoria. But with the coming of the war, and especially during the war, there's more control. There's a total censorship. And while there's not an ownership of the art or the artist, there's an overlordship of all of the art that's being produced. So all the art had to be approved by Nazi censors. And here's the irony of it. Even the Nazis didn't like Nazi art. That's most famously Hermann Goering's museum, where he confiscated all the modern art. And here's pictures. Here's a display of the modern art that is not un-Nazi, right? That is anti-Nazi, that has to be destroyed, right? Hermann Goering took as much as he could get and hung it all in a castle in the Bavarian mountains in the Alps. He kept it. He liked modern art, even though he was ranked second after Hitler in the Nazi party. So even the Nazis didn't like Nazi art, or the Nazi philosophy towards art. So again, the ridiculousness of fascism is that even the people who practice it don't like all of it. You know? So we end with a thank you. Thank you for dealing with this. I know it's a long lecture, and it's a lecture that speaks harshly to you as the listener, because fascism hates you. But I'll leave you with an image from Charlie Chaplin's speech in The Great Dictator, in which he talks about anti-fascism. And it's one of the great speeches, and it's in the movie, but it's not to other characters. It's to the audience. It just stops. The movie just stops. And it's Charlie Chaplin standing there, and the camera slowly zooms in, and it's just him speaking to you, to the audience. So I want you to take your time. You can pause it. You know, we think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. You, the people, notice the emphasis on the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wondering adventure. In the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. So, we all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We all want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there is room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. That's not how the Nazis saw it. That's not how the fascists in Spain or Italy saw it. They saw a zero-sum game where if I don't have, others have, and they are taking it away from me. So take a moment to read this and be safe, be kind to each other. Don't be a fascist. It's a terrible system of hate and anger and violence, and all it did was destroy everything. All it did was destroy everything. Spain was no better off in 1975 than it was in 1940. It had been left behind. All it did was murder lots of people. Italy was destroyed by the war. Mussolini got murdered by his own countrymen and strung up. If you want to see some horrible pictures, go take a look and Google for those. Those will haunt you for a while after they beat the living out of him. Ceausescu out in he's not technically a fascist. He's one of the Soviet communist leaders, but he got shot by his own people in 1989 in Romania on live television. Him and his wife. Mussolini and his girlfriend. Hitler and his wife / girlfriend, killed killed themselves and got lit on fire so that the Russians wouldn't capture them. And Germany was obliterated, as we'll talk about, broken up. Berlin was smashed. Dresden was bombed so that nothing really stood there anymore. Fascism isn't good for anybody. But it feels good because it tells you it can fix problems by hurting the people you dislike. But it didn't. It only hurt more people and more people and more people. All fascism does is destroy things. It can't build anything. So be safe, be kind. Good luck, and I'll talk to you soon.